Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, brought to you by InView, LawView's community for in-house legal professionals. InView's mission is to accelerate the evolution of the in-house legal profession, and with this podcast, we showcase modern legal leaders from across the globe. We explore their unique journeys and how they're driving the transformation of our new profession. Join David Lancelot, LawView's Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Advocacy, as he explores the cutting edge of in-house legal leadership. This is the Legal Leaders Podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm David Lancelot, your host. I'm the CLO and EVP Advocacy at Law. I have the great pleasure to have with me here today, Ed Rastelli, who is the head of BRR operations and the chief of staff for the legal team at IHG Hotels and Resorts. Thank you for joining me here today, Ed.
A pleasure, David. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you, mate. I thought we'd start with maybe unpacking your long and complex title.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, look, head of BRR operations is just another way of saying head of, let's start with the BRR bit, because I think that explains it. This is a typical sort of head of legal operations type role, but BRR is where it gets a bit more complicated. So that's a collection of sort of similar functions in IHG. So in other organizations I've worked, risk, compliance, insurance, audit, they've all sat separately as their own individual standalone functions. But here at IHG, we bundle them together, and so BRR is just an acronym, a description for those six or so functions that all sit under the same person. And so that does include legal, compliance, risk, audit, insurance, company secretary, and my role is just to perform, operations effectively, as how we deliver our services to the business, but just across those functions rather than just focused on just the legal thing.
Gotcha. And then chief of staff on top of that?
Yeah. So you take this role of, I guess, a lot of what I do is sort of people focused, right? And so a lot of what we look at is not just necessarily, operational delivery of services or technology change, which are all sort of core aspects of the role, but it's also, understanding how we, bring people along on that journey, how we make organizational decisions, changes, and so you sort of have a role to play in sort of managing the staff, employee, I don't want to call them that way, but colleagues, in and amongst doing everything else that we're doing from an operational perspective. And that sort of falls in under the chief of staff role. Right on.
And I have to say, I feel fortunate to have seen you in action, doing that sort of both jobs, I guess, at the same time, right? We first met, and I did a presentation at the IHG sort of legal leadership team meeting, I guess you call that, in London.
That was it.
And you were in full flow there, mate, doing, both the operational side and also the sort of like, hey, everybody, we need to get our, metrics and strategic stuff in, and where's your deck and all that kind of stuff. So it was really cool to see that happening in real time.
No. It's a good part of the role that I think sometimes gets split out, but actually it makes complete sense, I think, to have alignment across sort of the operational piece and then also, the people piece as well. I think
100%. Yeah, no, and I've seen that in other places too with other friends of mine, and as you say, it makes complete sense. It's a really great person to have in the room. We had something similar at eBay, and that person was such an extraordinary value add. When you're GCing, CLOing, and there's just so much that you don't have time to do. And it would be awesome to have a really professional person doing for you. So it just takes everything up a level, right? Really takes things up a level.
Hopefully. Hopefully, definitely.
Can you tell us a little bit for anybody who doesn't spend as much time in hotels as I do? What IHG Hotels and Resorts is?
So IHG Hotels. So, in effect, the strapline is it's a global hotel business basically, and so I think we've got now 20 brands that form part of what we call IHG. So some of the more common ones that people may know are Holiday Inn Express, Kimpton, Intercontinental. But then we've got additional brands like Voco, Vignette, Six Senses. They all sit under IHG as the master company, and operate globally in all of the sort of main jurisdictions that anyone can think of, and some others that maybe they don't as well. But primarily the business model is asset light type business model where we provide franchising services to franchisees, to hotel owners. We've got a significant franchise hotel estate. And then also, the second part of that is then also we offer management services as well to those hotel owners as well. And so the business is primarily sort of a franchise and managed business, asset light, but providing all the services, getting owners up to speed with what they need to successfully run a hotel, and we help them from sort of deal, or our teams do from sort of deal through to execution, and obviously opening and then running and performing the hotel. And so IHG just offers that as the corporate function, or as the corporate business behind that sort of model.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because I know you and the IHG legal team, or because it really is this way, but I feel like IHG has a more significant brand presence as a sort of, I don't know if you call it a holding company, but like as the umbrella company above all of these extremely well-known brands than some of the other businesses in that space, right? And I think of coming out of that meeting in London with you and the team and going into Heathrow and being like, the entire security zone of Heathrow was IHG. It was amazing. I was taking pictures of the whole thing because it was so cool to have gone from one place to another place. It's how many hotels does IHG have off the top of your head?
Yeah. So it changes, but it's something like around 6,500, 7,000 hotels, something like that globally. I think, some of the other hotel businesses in the same space, the Marriotts and the Hiltons, obviously, probably more, not necessarily more well known, but as a name brand, like business brand, as it were, in the States, it's they're sort of as big, if not bigger, in that jurisdiction. But where IHG, particularly with the global reach that we have in areas like the Middle East, Asia, China, we do a ton of work out there, which is really the strength, I think, of the business itself. It doesn't really matter which country you're in. If there's an opportunity for a hotel, generally we've got a model that, a brand that would work. And so that's what the power of a global business brings, I think. So maybe some people more would know more Marriott and Hilton, but IHG as a master brand is definitely on the way up, I would say.
Yeah. No, I see it everywhere these days. And of course, all of the, everybody knows Holiday Inn here, man. Of course.
Yeah. Cool.
That basically is hotel, right? That's like saying, Kleenex for tissues, Holiday Inn for hotel, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So, I mean, fascinating business. My background, very, very much an international business person. So I really love hearing about businesses with a global footprint like that, and the issues, particularly the legal issues, of course, that arise in that situation. So really must be interesting to have a legal function that has that portfolio, right, to deal with, to engage with, let's say. And I'd be interested to hear, like, at a high level, what the legal function looks like for a 6,500 hotel global business.
Yeah. So BRR in total is sort of, a few hundred people, right? And within that, we've got the legal teams, and they perform a sort of, a lot of the lawyers are sort of where the hotels are, basically, is the easiest way of describing it. That's the easiest way of describing our structure. So where the business is, we put our people basically, particularly in our function. I think that's super important. And a lot of what we're doing here is with hotels, it's not like you're just selling a subscription, right? It's it's a multi-year, millions of dollars type investment. Sometimes you're literally building the thing. You're not converting a brand from somewhere else, or potentially not even converting a building that exists into a hotel. You're literally building it from the ground up. And so it's a significant legal role, I would say, in terms of not just doing the deal, but then helping it sort of manage that all the way through. And then as I say, once it's open, that's just the beginning really of what is hopefully a very long and prosperous relationship between IHG and an owner. And so our legal team is there, as I say, close to the markets it needs to be to help support, all through the operational and hotel life cycle that exists, which we hope sort of, frankly, David, never ends, right? Like we hope it carries on going and,
Yep.
and you re-sign and whatever else. And, obviously owners, when they do find performance with our brands and the hotels, they're obviously keen to continue doing more. And so that's where we need to be. And a lot of the legal team are very front office facing. They're supporting the deals, supporting the development. And a lot of those are very complex, bespoke type arrangements, as you can imagine. And so, that's, primarily why we've got a lot of people where we do. Then there's the usual sort of, global type approach to some of these activities, where you can take a more, consistent and aligned approach to particular issues or processes from a legal perspective. And we have, global teams that sort of support those initiatives. But primarily sort of regional BU support where appropriate. And, we've grown the team in that regard. Obviously we do a ton of work behind the scenes from a legal perspective to try and ensure that we're, approaching things in a similar or the same way. And being a global business, I think that's pretty important, but obviously, difficult to do in some instances, and markets are different and owners are different and there's different regulatory pressures. And so that's just necessarily something that just drives nuances in the way we approach legal support. But, generally, where we can, we try and find those synergies, but primarily, based front and center with the business, supporting that day to day.
Yeah. Yep. That makes a lot of sense for that business model. I've seen that.
The $1 million, like there's huge investments, right? Like huge
Sure.
investment, big performance, aims and ambitions. And so it's, as I say, it's a very unique business, right? It's not, typically people are trying to sell something and
move on. Yep.
Try something, move on to the next one, and try and make that standard and easy. And when we do try and make it standard and easy, but equally it's typically not, right, because of the size of the investment and the size of the deal that's happening. And frankly, the fact you need to build a massive hotel, and it comes with a lot of risk, right? And it comes with lots of safety issues, lots of thoughts about operational issues that you've got to have, logistics. It's like you're signing them up to run a fairly sizable business, and that's that's not an easy thing to do. So it definitely needs a lot of support, and that's the value I think that a function brings.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So you're coming to us from London.
Yep.
Yep. I think you're probably London born and bred.
I am. Yeah, North London. So I'm an Arsenal fan. If anyone
Nice.
cares about the football, but yeah. Yep.
Well, my dad is also Arsenal
Oh, well,
supporter.
Dave,
I've
that's
had
fine.
a Gunners jersey since I was very small.
You've got a nickname down. Perfect. I love that. Yeah.
I've been there. So a North London boy. How does a
Yep.
North London boy get into the legal sector in the first place? I mean, you're not a traditional, training
No.
contract solicitor type, right? So how did that happen? Where did you start?
Yeah, I never actually studied law at all. I never even, if I'm perfectly honest, I never even thought law was a sector I would frankly ever get into, and certainly didn't plan on that for education at all. And I studied business management and at university, and then after that, ended up moving into a bank, but it's like a PMO, like a project administrator, to begin with, because frankly, with most people, I think they sort of don't know what to do when they come out of university, and And I was trying to, figure out the world. And it's a lot easier actually looking back on, if you're a lawyer and you want to be a lawyer and you train to be a lawyer and then you are a lawyer and, I know it's very competitive and everything, but sort of you have a fairly, easy, trodden path for you to follow. Right. But yeah, no, came out, had some experience of doing like being in business. I coached football in America and sort of helped run parts of their business over there, particularly the sales and marketing side. I just sort of thought, that sort of stuff wasn't for me probably. And found some interesting roles at banks actually that were hiring in the UK when I came out. I actually finished uni in 2009. So it was just the year after the credit crisis. And actually, teams were sort of ramping up quite considerably in the UK. And so, yeah, found a role there, at HSBC. And then just progressed up the sort of natural project management type ladder. So I went from sort of being a PMO to a business analyst, and then ended up getting into getting given a project. And this is how I got into legal ops, but getting given a project on the running it for risk. Actually, it was a risk compliance and legal program to look at regulatory tracking and horizon scanning, and sort of the bank's responses to changing regulatory requests and requirements that were happening, regularly, as you can imagine, during that time. And so, anyway, I was sort of running that project, and that was all going well, and we were completing on that. And frankly, I was a contractor back then, and was for many years thereafter. But and the GC at the time had just joined from Lloyd's into the UK legal team at HSBC, and he had just joined, and he had sort of no idea about how much money he was spending, who he was spending it with, where his people were, what they were doing. He had no idea about the technology that his teams were using, whether or not they could use it. He just needed help really figuring out like what his team looked like, how it was operating. And so went and joined him and got given a role with him. And that was back when I don't think legal ops was really called legal ops. It was just sort of come and help out, make my function run a bit better. And so joined him. And then, that was sort of a great role. And that was my sort of entry into legal operations, and I had a number of roles at HSBC before I moved on.
Yeah. And it always surprises me, although I guess it shouldn't anymore, how that situation you're describing is so normal.
Yeah.
In the in-house sort of legal space. Doesn't matter on the sector or the geography. How much are you spending? Where are your people? Who are your people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Incredible.
Who's even
I always laugh because I always look back and think, you're a kid coming out of uni and you always think banks are like the most well-run, effective businesses ever, right? And they basically hold up the world, right? And so, and then you get in there and you go, Jesus, like you're still, you're doing everything on Excel spreadsheets basically. And it was definitely eye-opening. And then particularly like, then we layered on the sort of law firm side, legal department side of it. And again, similar thing, like in-house legal teams that, again, they do struggle with, key issues that every in-house legal team does. And it was no different at HSBC.
Yeah. No, it always surprised me. And I think it's, you started that role back in 2014.
I think it was,
which is a good, as you say, like particularly outside of a few U.S. businesses, legal operations was not a, codified sort of profession yet. And I think, and we'll talk about this, it still kind of isn't, right? But that situation where you have so much value to add exists in so many places still exists in so many places. And I think it's really part of the transformation that the in-house legal profession is undergoing, the evolution that is undergoing now. So much of it is driven by this realization that we can't have just one function in our business that doesn't have operations. Right? Your sales team has ops, obviously. Your HR team, like you wouldn't hire a head of HR who didn't come in and go, I'm going to need ops, I'm going to need analytics, I'm going to need a platform to run it all on. It's all in the budget already. Like let's go to town, right? Like the presentation that person gives to become the CHRO has to have all of those elements in it, right? But so much of legal still has that opportunity, and it's actually, it's kind of a cool thing that we can add so much value. There's still so much low hanging fruit. So interesting that you came in through that angle. So now that you've been doing it for a little bit more than 10 years, Ed, sorry to say that out loud.
I believe it.
A little bit more than 10 years, you're stuck with the lawyers now.
Yeah.
How do you think about what the modern, and obviously there have been legal operations people in businesses for quite some time, doing different things, right? But I think the modern role, the sort of what you do, the BRR, legal operations, and chief of staff role is a different thing. What would you say that role encompasses these days for those people who are listening are like, either I want that job or I need somebody who can do that job for me?
Yeah, sure. I think legal ops, to your point, I started back in the day really looking at like outside counsel, external law firm spend and managing that spend. I think that's where it sort of grew from. And then it's really grown arms and legs from there. You get some people that are effective in, driving good outcomes for the function in sort of how we handle law firms. And then it applies, then you bring that forward and then it starts to look at, well, how do we more effectively deliver our services? We're asking a lot of the law firms about how do we more effectively deliver our services to the business that we're ultimately serving. Yep. And that's what my role really is. Like it's encompassing a number of what I would sort of describe as verticals maybe, but we can think a lot of them sort of interlink and interject with one another. But primarily I would see it as sort of 5 or 6 big ticket items, and we can touch on those if you want to. But, financial management's a key bit, like helping run the budget, helping, direct the spend to, the appropriate firms externally, helping to determine where we're spending money on our technology, all of that, where we're making investments in people, and development, all of that sort of sits in my mind under financial management. And that's definitely a key part. And, thankfully, not just IHG, but all the other businesses previously that have run a similar role in, you have to have good, finance business partner support. So you get good understanding of the ledger and frankly, what your function's costing. And you've got to do that in the sense of, and we'll probably come on to this, but of, ultimately, it's just a dollar cost, right, to the finance team or to the CEO who's looking at saying, well, why is legal, in our instance, BRR costing as much as it is, or maybe not costing as much as he thought or she thought. But in either way, you've got to have good financial management to then be able to, I think, tell the story about the value of the function. We can touch on those. I think that's a bigger discussion, but financial management's definitely one. The second bit is, people, right? And that stretches both from, do we have the right people in the right places supporting the right activities for the business? And, a lot of that comes from what is the priorities of the business, and then therefore what are the priorities for the function, and how do we need to adapt, change, or improve in some way, our organizational or service delivery model to enable those delivery of those priorities. And so a large part of it, I would say, is the people side, and that includes everything from sort of development, training, all of those things sticking under that vertical, basically. The third bit is, no surprise, is all about technology, and which platforms, what value they're delivering to you. And then obviously now with the advent of AI, like how is that filtering in? How is that, a key initiative, work stream, whatever, under this technology pillar, which, frankly, I think needs to be a big driver of how you deliver services, and utilizing technology in a way that isn't just a repository for stuff, but actually allows you to get to good outcomes and improve your service model in some way to the business. And so technology is a big one. Then there's another one in there, which is a bit icky, but it's massive. It's absolutely massive for in-house teams. It's knowledge management, right?
Yep.
And law firms have, teams of people that support them to do knowledge management effectively. And that's just not, that's not just the storage of emails and documents in the right place against the right stuff and the tagging of things. It's the surfacing of the right information at the right time to the right person, and sort of ensuring that they're able to access knowledge, like, and that's including like guidance notes, playbooks, previously provided advice from law firms, anything you want to determine as knowledge, templates, policy documents, whatever it might be, right? Stick all in there, but doing that in a way that is helpful to the in-house team. In my instance, not just lawyers, but obviously we taught legal ops, but making sure that that's available readily in a easily consumable format, so that the lawyers are able to do their job more quickly, at a higher level of performance, etc., is massive. And there's so much wastage, I think, actually in in-house teams about, they know it exists, but they don't know how to get to it. They don't know where it is. More often than not, actually, they might instruct a different law firm for a similar piece of advice we received the previous week. And I had that exact example of HSBC, many years ago, of two people sitting next to one another and asking two different law firms basically the same question. I mean, they were literally sat next to each other, both working on mortgage products. It was quite scary, but anyway, and that is, that's a huge part. And in the last sort of pillar, as it were, and we can sort of, this is a slightly fluffier one, but incredibly important, is the piece around communications and sort of, strategy and the journey. And that large piece, I think, gets forgotten quite a bit, actually, or it gets pushed to the back, and other things of just delivering change or delivering operational effectiveness really take a precedent. But, we're very clear, particularly in our teams, that, actually being able to engage with the function and engage with the business in an appropriate way to tell them about what's happening and how we're doing what we're doing and why that's going to be a good thing is super important. And so comms, strategy, that sort of last pillar is really the fifth one there. And I've forgotten what I've said, but like that those are sort of the core activities, I guess.
Very well stated. And I think you really nailed it on that last one there. The communicating the vision for what's the purpose of the function is fundamental to so many things, and in particular change management. And it's a time of such fundamental change for in-house legal. I mean, for all businesses, but particularly for this sort of the last function to be SaaSified, hiding away, right? The last back office function to get its chance to have a seat at the table. That if you don't tell people, if you're not good at communicating and don't prioritize communicating the vision and the purpose, when it comes time to say, hey, I'm going to take 40% of the work off your plate with this awesome new thing, whether it's a process, a policy, a technology, or some other people, there's going to be a whole lot of, what about my job? And as somebody recently said on this show, it's not about taking away your work. It's about taking away the work you never really should have been doing in the first place, so that you can do the work that you want to do. And having the ability to do that, having somebody like you who knows that's important, you know what I mean? Is really, really valuable, really crazy valuable. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Well, that being said, I was on another similar chat yesterday, and someone said, it came on to the point about, wanting to remove, lower, easy work, frankly, and not necessarily easy, but just work you just, isn't sexy or you just don't want to do. And actually, one of the chaps and moderators there was saying, actually, I had a chat with someone who said, I'm quite happy doing that, and take that away. And it just, it made me reflect. I was like, okay,
I've heard the same.
That whole comms piece and bringing people along on the journey with you is, absolutely.
And it takes way longer than you think.
It does.
It's a much more sophisticated skill set than you think, right? Like, and I think going from, there's a huge like spectrum of skill sophistication, going from dealing with like reducing outside counsel costs to leading change at a vast global organization, right? So I think that is, for me, really encapsulates the higher level work done by operations these days, the management, the strategic level work, along with, management level and like tactical operational level, that is of course part of the role, right?
Yeah.
And a really important part of the role, but definitely part of the role. Um, I think we can pivot a bit now to technology.
Yeah.
I know you want to talk about that, so I'm happy to talk about that too. As you said, you spend a lot of time in one of those pillars, and probably all of them, thinking about how can I make, how can I accelerate this business? How can I make our team more effective? Maybe people can have a holiday once in a while.
Yeah.
How do you think about technology? What's your process?
Yes. So I would say my thoughts on technology have significantly changed over the last 9 months. So let's just start there. In the past, legal technology solutions, they were 10 a penny, ones that had failed, people have implemented. You've heard all the horror stories of they stick something in, they think it's going to solve their issues, doesn't get implemented well, doesn't get adopted, dies, and then they're just like, then they go around telling people, oh, it's the text rubbish. And with any technology that you implement, it needs to be done properly. And so I super think, I don't know why, but often legal departments, for some reason or another, and I get it, they're not technologists, right? They don't think about, they've not been trained to think about process optimization, and they've been trained to look at the risk and issue and everything and where it could go wrong. And I guess that's the neat thing of not having a legal background, is I try and sort of cut through some of that. But primarily the way ultimately I think about tech is it's got to be an enabler. It's got to drive some value. You've got to be able to get something more out of it than you're putting in. And more often than not, you see a lot of technology that's just a repository, just effectively a database. And I do often wonder like why people don't just use SharePoint, or why they don't just use, something that's readily available in a Microsoft suite, because they could just do, frankly, the same thing, just using products without having to pay much money. And so
I've had the exact same thought, Ed.
Sometimes I just think,
so many consultants make so much money selling like a straight up repository for information. And it does make you think, like, are you giving your customers the full perspective here, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot more to it than, great that that you have your documents in one place, but why aren't you using the G Drive, or 365 to do that? I've had the exact same thought. Sorry.
It's the same. It's crucial. And sometimes I've looked at technology stacks or products in the past, and I just thought, wow, like show me something more here. So I think tech needs to be able to, solve a problem and provide you good outcome and drive value. Now where it's changed, that's still the same, but where it's really elevated now is obviously with AI, and the introduction of AI, because now I think it's making it simpler to implement technology solutions and get more value out of them, because either the interfaces, the configuration requirements, setting up the system, is easier because you got less traditional sort of ways of coding, and it's AI is sort of increasing the ability to implement more quickly or potentially a better product. And then also crucially, like just with AI, you're able to extract a lot more information and data from a solution. And so any product that has that and gives you insights that you can use the AI to interrogate your data and find out things that in the past you had to sort of traditionally search for, or pivot table or whatever else, that's gone away. So AI is just elevating, I think, the opportunity for technology solutions to really drive value. And then it's becoming, now the way I think about it is, okay, well, which one's best, and which one crucially will be around in a year's time. And I sort of like what's happening now to the .com bubble, and there's tons of businesses that are starting up, AI businesses that are starting up, and surely you'd think that there can't be a marketplace for all of them, right? I think I see this little square that keeps popping up on my LinkedIn now and again of more and more businesses that are coming into just the legal tech space, not necessarily just even the technology space. And it's just another 50 get added each week, I think. And and I get it. They're all there to serve a purpose, and there's the rush to the gold mine, as it were. But like, surely some of them are gonna fall by the wayside. I think we've seen some news this week already about one of them. And so, it's sort of, you've got to then also choose your partnerships cleverly and really think about, the financial, longevity of these businesses. Because a lot of what they're providing or suggesting sounds amazing and is obviously of highly largely used to lawyers, but you can't then start making decisions about impacts to your team, your structure, your services, whatever it might be, if that business then ultimately isn't going to be there in a year and a half's time. And so there's that sort of cautionary bit about now technology solutions, whereas in the past you just sort of partner up with Salesforce, the big ones, LawView, but now it's you get some kind of small players that have some really innovative solutions that maybe just don't have the financial backing that you need as a large business to really implement. But it shouldn't stop you from trying them. It's just you need to be really careful about where you put your eggs, basically.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the realizations I think a lot of people are having these days is, including myself, taking a lot of money from VCs and PE and whatever actually can be a risk sign. Where in the past it was sort of, we took 40, 50, 90 million dollars. Oh, they're all good. Actually, you may have taken too much money. And now your backers are asking you to grow so fast that you just can't catch up. And I think we've actually seen that cycle. We're almost in round 2 of that in the last sort of 5-6 years, right? Because we saw that with the contract management solutions. Some of them took too much money and are now sort of having real trouble. And now we're seeing as you say, if you look at that sort of market map of the AI solutions, it's very similar to what you saw with the contract management solutions a few years ago, where there's like 250 logos on a page, and you're like, how is this even possible? But it actually is. There are, and I can tell you, not far from here, there's 12 people living in a small house in Palo Alto, each one with a different wrapper for GPT that does whatever. And it really does remind me of the .com days, and it reminds me of right pre-pandemic almost. Where there were signs in San Francisco for some of the funniest businesses I've ever seen, because there was so much money right in the market. That's definitely something to look out for. You also wanted to talk a bit about data. Everybody knows I'm a huge fan of data metrics and benchmarking. How do you approach data for driving decision making at IHG?
Well, it kind of links to the whole AI thing. I mean, one thing it's really opened up is this ability to, I think, traditionally, right, in-house legal teams have had point solutions for particular problems. You mentioned CLMs there, then you have a billing solution, then you have your legal hold solution, then you got a trademark management platform, you got all these, in our instance, we've got a ton of other platforms for insurance purposes and compliance purposes as well. And so you've got a lot of information sort of in places, right? In terms of like how what your team's doing day to day, right? And it's information about, I guess, the estate that you're supporting, the business that you're supporting really, and the amount that they're engaging with legal. And so AI helps obviously net that together more easily than it did traditionally, where you'd just be sort of merging Excel files, right? Basically, and AI allows you to get to that point a bit quicker. So then it's a case of like, right now, how do you really use that information, that data? And it's really data for data's sake, as I say, isn't the most exciting thing. I think there's loads of times I've produced a deck, or someone produced a deck for me, or has sort of shown it to me, and you read it and you go, well, this is great, but sort of what are we going to do with this? Like, what does it tell us? Or what does it tell us? Or what does it tell us we should now do is the key bit. And it's one thing that I think just to be able to report on, what you're doing, which I think is sort of handy at times, but not particularly exciting. It's just for saying you're doing stuff. And I think everyone's sort of busy, and if they're not, that's a different question. But ultimately, like, data telling you that you are is sort of, good to know. But I think the key bit is sort of how you can use that information, that data, to then make some business decisions, to then talk about like how you can improve the outcome for the business or the outcome that you're trying to achieve, even from a functional perspective. And so it's using that data, I think, in a way that's not just around your functions activities, but it's like how the function is performing. And that's the difference. It's like, how are we enabling a good outcome, rather than we've done 50 compliance checks this month and we're safe. It's like, what have we enabled in that regard? And that's where, like, I think data is crucial. It's maybe being misused, or maybe not getting the most out of what you can do with your information, but it is just looking at it in a different way, which I like to do, which is sort of just flip it on its head a little bit and say, okay, but what is this actually enabling us to go and do? Or what is this telling us that we should be able to go and do? And as soon as, I think, as you start looking through data in that lens, then you do actually change the way in which you collect stuff, like, and the information that you're looking at, the metrics that you are actually reporting. You do change how and what they are, frankly, but it's all going to be under the guise, in my mind, of how are you enabling the business, how are you driving that value as a function, how are you allowing the business to deliver its strategic priorities. And if you look at it in that regard, then the data piece is absolutely crucial. Whereas in the past, I think it's just been, we spent some money with a law firm, or we did 5,000 matters this year, and it's good. Like, it's nice to know, but it doesn't really tell a story about the legal function and why it's there and the value it's enabled. And that's, looking at it through that lens, I think is super useful.
I am going to make a shirt that says that. That is, I couldn't have said that much better, I don't think.
That's good to hear.
We've had this conversation before, of course.
Yeah.
Like the idea of operational, internal to the legal function metrics, I think it's worth saying maybe that we should know those. And I encounter legal leaders almost daily who don't have them, right?
Cool.
And how valuable it is to actually know what's going on in your function, where your resources are being used, so that you can make
decisions. Why.
Yeah.
And why. So why are they there?
Why am I not hearing anything from the whatever business unit is a great signal, right?
Yeah.
This business unit is not doing a great deal of business with the legal function. That could be a warning sign. Maybe we should know about that, but that's not the kind of thing that you want to report at a business leadership team meeting. I've said this before, like the CFO, the head of sales, the CMO are not getting up regularly and saying, we're spending less than comparable functions at other businesses, right? Which was my key metric for a long time, right? Total legal spend to revenue versus benchmarks. And it's kind of like, that's great to know, lawyer guy. You actually can do math. Well done.
Yeah.
But what they really care about at those business at that level is how are you driving, as you exactly said, the strategic objectives of the business. And once you're thinking that way, then, as you say, you can go back to first principles and start thinking about, how are we collecting data? Why are we collecting data? What is the data we're collecting on intake, right?
Yep.
Which business unit is doing this? What strategic objective is this? Whatever piece of legal work aligned with, et cetera. And then you can start putting efficiencies against those things that aren't as strategically important, and start putting your really heavy duty in-country business unit lawyers on what's important to the business, right? Even just giving them the time to understand what's important to the business. Because so much of the time of so many in-house lawyers is so reactive. So I couldn't have put it better.
See, I'll give an example, like not at IHG, it's a previous role. We were looking at sales contracts, like basically, and the time, they call it time to revenue, or the time to contracts, basically. And this period between sort of, opportunity to then a contract being shared with the counterparty through to sort of when it was executed and ultimately when they could bill. And so, and that, that period of time was whatever that period of time was, 30 days, 28 days, 45 days, it varied across every deal. And I always remember having a conversation with the then COO, who was like, it'd be great just to understand how long that is so we can start projecting and understanding. And so we did ultimately pull out some data that sort of said on average, we take 30 odd days, whatever, to move from start to finish on a contract and execute. And then it became like, well, what's legal's time in that? What's our time frame in that? And so then we have to do a bit more work with the CLM to understand sort of when we send it out, when it comes back in, how long we take to review it, send it back out. And ultimately what it showed was, that the counterparty would sit on it far longer than the in-house legal team that was very quickly getting back to issues, red lines, comments, whatever it might be. And we, over that 30-day period or whatever the number of days was, on average, really the in-house legal team was spending maybe 2, at most 3 days on a particular contract. And so then it became like, well, we're actually sort of only on average 10% of the actual entire contracting process. And this is where the flip sort of then took, which is, okay, so what's our ambition here? It's to shorten the journey, right? Like it's to shorten the time from start to finish. We're obviously not the problem, like the legal function, the data is showing that. It's great that we can say that we've done all of these deals, but if it wasn't this interrogative way of looking at data, the same data ultimately, that they would then inform us about how we could standardize, provisions within the contract and look in more detail at, the data within the agreements, right? And where we had often fallen back on things that would just always be negotiated, but let's just start there. Or let's just make that simple up front. And it was those things more than it was just looking at how we can, make ourselves more efficient as the function. It was those things that actually led to then that time really coming down on time to execution of a contract. And those were the things that I guess you would never pick out if you just looked at, well, how many deals has legal supported? You look at it and you go, oh, it's that number. And what's roughly our time to execute? Well, it was 30 days. And do people feel okay with that? Well, yeah, broadly they do. But if it wasn't the case of sort of looking, and this is where I mean the data, like that wouldn't really tell us anything, but it was more the data about what we've negotiated in the contracts. And it was where,
Sure.
Those weren't even metrics we originally looked at, but it was going into those sorts of detailed pieces of data, which was far more important than the high level, this is what we've done as a function. And it was being able to then tell that story of, right, we've now looked at this layer down, this double click on actually what we've agreed to within the agreements. And we've come up with some real good suggestions here to the business that we just need to start here on our template agreement. And that's going to, in theory, lead us, much more easily to the executed position. God knows how much it'll bring it down, but it will, we anticipate bring it down a significant number. And then that ended up sort of like halving the contract time, because then the bits that were left in the agreement were really the bits that, frankly, fine, we're going to negotiate them. But
Sure.
that in itself would just never have really come out unless we had actually gone to metrics and data that were meaningful and trying to drive a business outcome, which ultimately was to see revenue more quickly generated.
And I think that is a really great, succinct example of operational mindset leading to business acceleration, leading to, I have to assume, increased revenues.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Straight up,
faster revenue
more money
recognition,
comes faster.
whatever
You
you want
have
to call
more
it.
time
Yeah.
to make more money, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And it's
Yeah.
just if you don't have the right level of people in your ops function to have that level of operational mindset such that you're driving like business value rather than solving, pure substantive legal issues. And I think the business case for doing that is a relatively, I won't say easy one, right? There's some explaining to do there to translate from legal to operations to the business, but much better business case to say we're going to accelerate time to revenue
Much easier to
than
get.
we're very busy in legal, we need more resources.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone's going to get behind the time to revenue journey, I think, much more easily. But yeah, you're right. And it's sort of, I think it comes back to just being able to tell that story properly. But it is obviously a shift in mindset of thinking you've got a team of lawyers who are probably functioning really well and, looking after the business as they do, to then say, actually, we want to put in someone who's frankly not even, never going to look at a contract, and negotiate it and not going to do any legal work. And I think that is a mindset shift, particularly at the sort of GC level, chief legal officer level, that they need to recognize that, things could be better. And whether or not they're being told that or they're recognizing it themselves, Ultimately that's part and parcel of what this role needs to be. Is you drive outcome, you drive value, and you just happen to be doing that with, an elevation of a team's capability, performance. And you do that through using tech, good process optimization, looking at metrics to give you that information. All of those things will come into it, and then a bit, long and short, to just summarize the legal ops role is then deliver it, right? And you've got to be a real deliverer of change, which is often hard. I'm not gonna lie, often hard, but
indeed. And I think the more CLO GC job descriptions I see all across the world, the more recently, over the past probably 6 months, including in continental Europe, the more I see the delivery of change and operational mindset and acceleration as a key responsibility of the legal leader, right? So this is something leading and understanding the need for people like you and your team is becoming more and more essential to doing that leadership job. And maybe that's a good segue to like our final point, I think, Ed, which is where do you see the future of legal operations going?
I might be a bit biased here. I do see it growing, just as a sector. I think it was relatively more mature in the US, less so in the UK, although definitely coming on, less so even more in Europe, and frankly sort of non-existent, I think across the Middle East and Asia. But you've got a handful of people there. I think legal operations or legal change transformation has typically been handed out to consultancies and specialist change management businesses and stuff that would come in and deliver something, whether that was technology or whether that was some sort of process optimization or simplifying of contracts. And I think now it's becoming, actually, there's so much to do that's so interlinked with financial management, with people change, with technology change, with strategy and communications, that actually that role, I think, is becoming more crucial to running, the legal department as a business. And to your point, finance have had ops people for years, risk have had ops people for years, the business have had ops people for years. That's probably a little easier one to solve, but they've all had these types of roles, just specific to their own functions. And I just I do see that growing. I just do think, and particularly with the advent of AI, where it is a real need to understand how you're going to patch all of this stuff together, get value from it. It's a big change. It's not just a one and done here. This is going to be a sort of, multi-year type of program. Not that you necessarily need to put that much of a structure around it, but just, things are going to develop, right? And so the more of these solutions, more of these AI agents, the more AI that you embed within the function, I think you're going to need someone who's good at sort of keeping their arms around that and maintaining the operations of it, and expanding that. And so that's where I think the role's going to go. I think where legal ops is going to go, it should, and I know I'm a bit biased here, but I definitely don't think it's a one and done. Everywhere I've been, it's never been a one and done. It's, there's always been an absolute need and continued need for this. And so, I can foresee that sort of where it's going to end up, it's going to just continue to grow. And I think it's going to become a lot more, you're going to bolt AI onto it, AI management onto it, which is probably not something traditionally that was part of the job, but that's going to become a thing. And it's going to be, definitely for people in my role, that's something we all need to level ourselves up about.
Yeah. Sure. And I think it's really a critical part of the modernization of the in-house function and profession. The way I talk about it is that if you want to be a purpose-driven function that accelerates the business, a function made up of business people with legal skills, if you want to spend time in the room where it happens, if you want to be involved in business strategy, if you want to do what you were talking about, which is scenario analysis and planning, if you want to ingest structured, accurate data to drive artificial intelligence, you can't do those things without this more specialized skill set, right? And I actually think this skill set will become part of every in-house lawyer's job in
I agree.
some
I
way,
agree.
right? Like
I agree.
everybody needs operational mindset. Everybody needs to know that it is a waste of time to do the same thing over and over and over, which has unfortunately traditionally been what lawyers do, right? And just charge the same, and and that's all
Like,
fine,
they've been
right?
getting
Like
paid for it in
talking
years.
about,
Yeah.
like, do that contract again, it's easy, right? But we don't want you to do that contract again. So moving from the old fashioned to the modern approach absolutely requires operational mindset. And especially in organizations that are more sophisticated, and especially at enormous ones like IHG, it's just fundamental to accelerating the function. And we're not going to be allowed to stand still.
I don't think so. Yeah, I really don't think so. I think I'm not saying AI is the be all and end all. I mean, people should be doing, frankly, should be doing these things already, right? Like, and challenging themselves about how to improve their service delivery and, their model. But I definitely think AI is an accelerator of that. Particularly because, frankly, there's huge news stories out there about, large businesses, they're making significant changes there to how they approach the delivery of their services. And so it doesn't take long for people to read those stories and then start applying it to their own business. And it's just an accelerator of that. And I don't think we've seen, not since I've been working anyway, I don't think we've seen that sort of, acceleration of change, which ultimately I do think is coming. And I do think you need a role that understands it and understands the application, and then ultimately can help deliver it and then run it. And, I do think that all sits under the umbrella of legal ops.
100%. Well, thank you, Ed.
No, all good.
Very insightful conversation. I really appreciate you spending the time live from
really enjoyed it. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been the Legal Leaders Podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.